I used to believe that a strong relationship was built on the ability to rely on each other, no matter what. Trust wasn't just a word. It was the foundation of everything. I wanted someone I could count on, someone who'd be there when life threw its worst at us. It wasn't about grand gestures or constant reassurances. It was about the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your partner would stand by you when it really mattered. For me, it always came back to trust. If you can't trust your partner, what do you really have? It's that sense of security, knowing that even when things get tough, you won't be left to handle everything alone. That's what I thought love was supposed to be, a partnership where both people could lean on each other. I always dreamed of finding someone who'd stick by me through the highs and lows, not just when it was convenient for them, but when I truly needed them. But over time, I started to wonder if that kind of trust was even possible. I had doubts creeping in, whispering that maybe I was expecting too much. Maybe finding a partner who could be counted on without question was more of a fantasy than reality. Still, I clung to the hope that I could find someone who wouldn't make me feel like I had to carry the weight of the world on my own. When I met Emily, I felt like I had finally found that rare connection I had always longed for. From the start, there was something about her that made me believe she understood the value of partnership. We shared laughter, dreams, and moments that felt as though we were the only two people in the world. I wanted her to be my partner, not just in love, but in life. I thought we could build a future together, grounded in mutual respect and unwavering support. Emily had her own ambitions and dreams, and I admired that about her. I believed we could elevate each other, pushing one another to be our best selves. But as time went on, I started to notice a troubling pattern. It seemed like every time we faced a challenge, instead of working through it together, she would retreat into her own problems, expecting me to step in and resolve them for her. I found myself caught between wanting to help her and feeling overwhelmed by her constant need for support. I craved a relationship where I could be her rock, but I also needed her to be mine. I wanted to share the load, not just bear it alone. My desire for a loving, supportive relationship began to feel less like a reality and more like a distant dream. Each time I rushed to her side, trying to solve her problems, it chipped away at the happiness we had built together. It felt like I was losing sight of our partnership, and instead, it was morphing into a dynamic that left me drained and questioning my own worth. One evening, after another exhausting day of navigating Emily's never-ending list of problems, I knew I had to address the growing tension between us. It wasn't easy, but I wanted to have an honest conversation about what was happening in our relationship. I hoped it would open the door to a deeper understanding of each other, a way to bridge the gap that had formed between us. Sitting down together felt daunting. I chose my words carefully, wanting to express my feelings without placing blame. I started by acknowledging how much I cared for her and how I admired her ambition, but I also needed to voice my struggles. The emotional weight I felt every time she turned to me with her issues, expecting me to play the role of her savior. I explained that it felt like I was constantly fixing problems rather than sharing a life together. At first, she listened quietly, her eyes reflecting a mixture of surprise and concern. I could see the wheels turning in her mind as she processed what I was saying. But as I continued, I noticed the tension in her body. Instead of engaging in the conversation, she began to withdraw. It was as if my words were pushing her away, and I could feel the distance growing between us. I wanted her to understand that I wasn't rejecting her. I was longing for a partnership where we could both rely on each other. I wanted to be her ally, not just her problem solver. But as the conversation unfolded, it became painfully clear that we were speaking two different languages. While I sought connection and teamwork, she seemed more focused on defending herself and her choices. As the discussion reached a standstill, I realized that this was more than just a disagreement. It was a fundamental misalignment in our relationship. I couldn't shake the feeling that despite my efforts, we were drifting further apart. I left that conversation feeling both exhausted and heartbroken, questioning whether we could ever find our way back to the trust and reliance I had always desired. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself grappling with the reality of our situation. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring into the abyss of uncertainty. I wanted to believe that we could work things out, that Emily and I could rebuild the trust that had slowly eroded. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was fighting an uphill battle. Then, one evening, I bumped into an old friend, Jake, at a local bar. We exchanged pleasantries, but I could sense he wanted to talk about something more. As we caught up, he hesitated before bringing up Emily. I didn't think much of it at first. I figured he'd just heard I was with her and was curious about our relationship. But then he leaned in, his expression turning serious. "David, I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but I've noticed some things," he said cautiously. "I've seen Emily out with another guy a couple of times. I thought you should know." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to dismiss them, to brush them off as misunderstandings or exaggerations, but the weight of his gaze told me he was serious. At that moment, the ground felt like it was shifting beneath my feet. I was flooded with emotions: anger, disbelief, heartbreak. My mind raced with questions. How could this be happening? Hadn't I been enough? The thought that she could seek comfort elsewhere while I was trying to support her through her struggles felt like a betrayal that cut deep. I spent the next few days in turmoil, wrestling with the truth I had just learned. I knew I needed to confront Emily, but I was terrified of what that conversation would hold. How could I possibly approach her about this without letting my emotions get the better of me? It felt like I was standing on the brink of a precipice, ready to leap into the unknown. The trust I had hoped to build with her now felt irrevocably shattered, and I was left questioning everything. After hearing Jake's unsettling news, my world tilted on its axis. I felt like I was trapped in a storm of emotions that I couldn't escape. The betrayal I sensed was not just about Emily. It was a direct attack on my self-worth. I had poured so much of myself into this relationship, convinced that my support and love would be enough to nurture and uplift us both. Now, I was left feeling inadequate, like I had failed at something I believed in so deeply. Each day felt heavier than the last. I started to replay every moment in my mind. The late nights she spent texting, the subtle changes in her demeanor, the moments I brushed off as stress. I felt foolish for not recognizing the signs earlier, for thinking that our bond was stronger than it apparently was. The self-doubt crept in like a thief in the night, robbing me of my confidence. How could I have been so blind? I found myself questioning every aspect of my identity. Was I not enough? Did I not provide the support she needed? The more I thought about it, the more I spiraled. I began isolating myself from friends, retreating into a shell of shame and confusion. I used to be the guy who embraced challenges with optimism, but now I felt like a shell of my former self, defeated, confused, and emotionally drained. The hardest part was grappling with the internal conflict of wanting to confront her and needing to protect myself from further pain. I knew I had to face Emily and seek the truth behind Jake's words, but I dreaded the confrontation. What if I was wrong? What if I was just allowing my insecurities to fuel my fears? Yet I also understood that ignoring the issue would only prolong my suffering. The weight of my thoughts bore down on me relentlessly. I felt like I was in a maze with no clear exit, trapped by my own mind and emotions. It was a painful realization that the person I had trusted so completely could potentially shatter everything I believed about love, trust, and partnership. My self-esteem was hanging by a thread, and I knew I had to confront the situation head-on, no matter how daunting it felt. After weeks of internal turmoil, I finally reached a breaking point. I felt like I was caught in a relentless cycle of uncertainty, where every moment was overshadowed by the possibility of betrayal. I knew I had to make a decision, either confront Emily about the rumors I had heard or walk away from a relationship that seemed to be suffocating me. The idea of leaving her was terrifying. I had invested so much time and emotion into our relationship, and part of me still clung to the hope that we could turn things around. But the other part of me, the part that was increasingly fed up with the emotional roller coaster, knew that staying could lead to even more heartache. It was a conflict that left me restless, unable to focus on anything else. I spent nights lying awake, wrestling with my thoughts. Memories of our happiest moments kept flashing through my mind, how we laughed together, the dreams we shared, the plans we made for the future. But those moments were overshadowed by the looming doubt and the reality that our relationship had morphed into something I could no longer recognize. I could feel the trust slipping away, replaced by a suffocating weight of expectations and unaddressed issues. Finally, I decided that I had to talk to her. I needed to face Emily and ask her directly about what Jake had told me. It was a necessary step, but I dreaded the conversation. I could already envision the confrontation, my heart racing, emotions running high, words tumbling out before I could think them through. I knew it was time to prioritize my mental well-being over the relationship. But what if I was wrong? What if the rumors were unfounded and I was about to throw away the best thing I ever had? Those thoughts plagued me, but deep down, I knew I couldn't continue living in this uncertainty. I had to reclaim my sense of self, and that meant confronting Emily about the trust that had been compromised. The decision weighed heavily on my heart, but I resolved to take that leap of faith, hoping it would lead me to clarity, whatever that might look like. As I prepared for the inevitable confrontation with Emily, I realized that I couldn't carry this burden alone. I needed support, a sounding board to help me sort through my feelings and gain perspective on my situation. I reached out to my close friends, hoping to find comfort and guidance in their experiences. I chose to meet up with Jake first, the same friend who had inadvertently dropped the bombshell on me. I figured he might have some insights, especially since he was the one who had seen Emily out with another guy. As we sat in our favorite bar, nursing our drinks, I opened up about everything: the emotional toll, the feelings of inadequacy, and the struggle to decide whether to confront her or walk away for good. Jake listened intently, nodding as I laid bare my frustrations and fears. "You deserve to be with someone who values you for who you are, not just what you can provide," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. His words struck a chord with me. It felt good to know that I had a friend who understood my struggle and believed in my worth. I also reached out to my sister, Lisa. She had always been my confidant, someone who offered a different perspective on life and relationships. As I recounted my feelings of betrayal and my internal conflict, she urged me to trust my instincts. David, you've always been someone who values trust and loyalty. If that's being compromised, you have to think about what's best for you, she said. Her unwavering support gave me a glimmer of hope. After these conversations, I felt a sense of clarity emerging from the chaos. My friends reminded me that it was okay to prioritize my own happiness, that I didn't have to settle for a relationship that felt one-sided. I realized that I needed to step into my power and make decisions that aligned with my values. With their encouragement, I finally felt ready to confront Emily. It was time to seek the truth, to find out where we truly stood. I understood that whatever the outcome, I had a support system that would be there for me, no matter what. That knowledge gave me the strength to face the storm ahead. After the conversations with Jake and Lisa, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Armed with their support, I realized it was time to prioritize my own healing. Confronting Emily was just one part of my journey. I needed to focus on rebuilding my self-esteem and finding strength in myself. I decided to channel my energy into activities that brought me joy and peace. I returned to the gym, something I had neglected in the chaos of our relationship. Sweating it out on the treadmill became my therapy, a way to release pent-up emotions and reclaim my sense of control. I also took up meditation, allowing myself to sit in silence and reflect on my thoughts without judgment. Those moments of stillness became a sanctuary where I could process everything that had happened and regain my footing. In addition to physical activities, I rediscovered hobbies I had pushed aside. I began painting again, letting my emotions spill onto the canvas. Each brushstroke was an expression of my journey, the pain, the confusion, the hope for brighter days ahead. It became a powerful outlet, reminding me of my creativity and resilience. I started connecting with old friends and making new ones, surrounding myself with positive influences who uplifted my spirit. But amidst this healing process, I still felt the weight of the impending conversation with Emily. I knew I had to face her, and I wanted to do so from a place of strength. I practiced what I wanted to say, rehearsing the words in my mind until I felt ready to speak my truth. This wasn't just about confronting her. It was about standing up for myself and advocating for my needs. As the day approached, I could feel the nerves bubbling up inside me, but they were different now. I felt empowered, ready to seek clarity about our relationship. I understood that I was worth so much more than the doubts and insecurities that had plagued me. No matter what happened in that conversation, I was determined to emerge stronger and more self-aware. After I confronted Emily, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. But the journey to recovery was far from over. It was clear that our relationship had become irreparable. Emily's responses only confirmed my fears, and as painful as it was, I knew I had made the right decision. I finally felt free, but also uncertain about the future. With this newfound freedom came an unexpected opportunity for growth. I started venturing out more, trying to meet new people and expand my social circle. One evening, a friend invited me to a networking event for local entrepreneurs. I almost declined, thinking I wasn't ready to put myself out there, but something urged me to go. That night, I found myself surrounded by ambitious and driven individuals. As I mingled, I met Sarah. She was charismatic and confident, with an infectious laugh that instantly drew me in. We struck up a conversation about our passions and dreams, and it felt refreshing to connect with someone who seemed genuinely interested in who I was beyond my past. The more we talked, the more I realized how different she was from Emily. Sarah was independent and had her own goals. She didn't rely on others to solve her problems. It was a breath of fresh air, and I found myself captivated by her energy. We exchanged numbers, and I felt a spark of excitement that I hadn't experienced in a long time. As we started hanging out, I noticed something remarkable. With Sarah, I felt safe. I could share my thoughts and feelings without the fear of judgment or the pressure to play the role of a fixer. She encouraged me to express my emotions and supported me in my healing journey. For the first time in ages, I felt like I was building a relationship on mutual respect and understanding. Of course, there were moments of hesitation. I found myself questioning whether I was ready to trust again. But with each passing day, Sarah's kindness and genuine interest in my well-being eased my fears. I began to understand that trust could be rebuilt, one small step at a time. It was a gradual process, but it felt good to explore the possibility of a future that included love and companionship once more. As my relationship with Sarah blossomed, I began to realize how far I had come since my breakup with Emily. With each date, I felt more like my true self, someone worthy of love and capable of being vulnerable without fear. Sarah brought a lightness to my life that I hadn't known in years. We spent countless evenings laughing over dinner, sharing our dreams, and discussing everything from our favorite books to our views on relationships. It was refreshing to connect on such a deep level without the emotional weight that had once anchored me down. Sarah's passion for life inspired me to pursue my own dreams with renewed vigor. I found myself re-engaging with my goals, both personally and professionally, feeling a sense of empowerment I hadn't felt in ages. One memorable weekend, we took a spontaneous trip to the mountains. The beauty of nature was awe-inspiring. But what truly stood out was how effortlessly we connected during our time together. As we hiked through the trails, I felt the healing power of the moment, the fresh air, the laughter, the shared adventures. It was as if I was rediscovering parts of myself that had been buried under layers of doubt and heartache. One evening, while watching the sunset, I turned to Sarah and shared my fears about opening up to love again. You know, after everything that happened with Emily, I was scared to let anyone in. But with you, it feels different, I confessed. To my relief, she smiled, understanding the vulnerability I was expressing. I get it, she replied gently. It's okay to take your time. Love is about building trust together, and I'm here for the journey. Her words resonated deeply within me. I felt a surge of gratitude for her presence in my life. It became clear that Sarah wasn't just a new chapter. She was the beginning of a beautiful story, one filled with hope and potential. As our connection deepened, I began to embrace the idea that love could be a source of joy rather than a burden. I learned that it was possible to share my life with someone who valued me for who I was, not just for what I could offer. This realization marked a significant shift in my perspective, one that allowed me to fully invest in my relationship with Sarah without the shadows of my past weighing me down. Just when everything seemed to be falling perfectly into place, the specter of my past threatened to creep back into my life. One afternoon, while I was scrolling through social media, a familiar name popped up: Emily. She had posted a photo of herself looking happy and carefree, surrounded by friends. The caption was a vague reference to moving on, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of regret and confusion. Why was I still affected by her presence? That evening, As Sarah and I were curled up on the couch watching a movie, I felt a storm brewing inside me. I suddenly couldn't shake the feeling that my past was still haunting me. I knew I had to be honest with Sarah, but I was terrified of how she would react. Would she think I was still hung up on Emily? Would this revelation put an end to the happiness we were building together? As the credits rolled, I took a deep breath and turned to her. "Sarah, there's something I need to talk about," I started, my voice trembling slightly. "I saw something on social media today that brought back a lot of emotions. I thought I was over it, but I realize there are still some unresolved feelings about my past with Emily." To my surprise, Sarah remained calm, her eyes steady and empathetic. "Thank you for sharing that with me. It's completely normal to have lingering feelings after a breakup. It doesn't mean you don't care about what we have." Her understanding took me off guard. I expected anger or hurt, but instead, she offered compassion. However, the tension in the room shifted when I confessed how I still felt haunted by the betrayal and emotional turmoil I had experienced. "It's just that sometimes I worry that I'll never fully move on. I don't want to carry this baggage into our relationship," I admitted, my voice cracking with vulnerability. Seeing the pain in my eyes, Sarah took my hands and said, "You're not alone in this. We can work through it together, but it's important that you let go of that weight." Her words were like a lifeline, but deep down, I felt the fear of losing her creeping in. I could sense that she was willing to be there for me, yet I worried that my past might overshadow our present. Over the next few days, I wrestled with these emotions. I sought solace in meditation, trying to gain clarity. I realized that I had to confront my fears directly, not just for my sake, but for Sarah's as well. I needed to break the cycle of my past, dictating my future. With that determination, I reached out to Emily. I had to put closure to that chapter of my life. We met at a small cafe, and I felt a whirlwind of emotions as I walked in. Emily was sitting there, looking as lovely as I remembered, but this time I felt different. I wasn't the same person who had loved her blindly. As we talked, I laid everything on the table: how her actions had impacted me, the pain of feeling unvalued, and my journey of healing since our breakup. To my surprise, she listened intently, reflecting on her own growth. "I never realized how much my behavior affected you. I'm sorry for the pain I caused," she said, sincerity in her voice. For the first time, I felt a sense of liberation. I didn't need her approval or validation anymore. I was reclaiming my narrative, and it felt empowering. When the conversation ended, I knew I had finally closed that door. I walked away, not just free from her shadow, but also with a deeper understanding of what I truly wanted in a partner. Returning home, I felt a renewed sense of commitment to Sarah. I shared everything about the meeting, and her reaction was one of unwavering support. "I'm proud of you for facing your past head-on," she said, her eyes shining with admiration. It felt like the weight I had carried for so long had lifted, and in that moment, I realized how lucky I was to have someone like her in my life. From that day forward, I chose to embrace the present and the future I was building with Sarah. It was a new beginning, filled with hope, laughter, and the promise of love. I learned that trust is not just about being faithful, it's about being reliable, open, and creating a safe space for one another. Our relationship grew stronger, and as we continued to build our lives together, I discovered a happiness I never thought possible. I had transformed my pain into purpose, and every step of the way, I learned to appreciate the power of trust and the beauty of true connection. I knew this journey was just the beginning, but I was ready to face whatever came next, together with Sarah by my side.